Hey guys, welcome back. So today I have another Powermate Pulse 1850. And some of you might be saying, didn't you just do a video on this? And the answer is yes. I wouldn't say just did it, but it was one of my first videos a few months back. And looking back on that video, I don't really like the way it came out. It's hard to hear me, and the video is not very good quality. So I'm hoping to redeem myself with this one. This one does seem to be more of a challenge. So worst case, it'll be a good video. Best case, I'll have a working generator. So you can probably tell from just looking at this that this machine's pretty crusty. It's extremely dirty, and it has stuff sitting on top of the fuel tank, like dirt, dust, I don't know what it is. But what drew me to this machine is that it's complete. I don't see really anything broken, nothing's missing, and that means a lot, especially on older machines like this, because you cannot find parts for these machines other than the very basics. So anyway, that's kind of what drove me to get this. It was advertised as running, but carburetor issues. And the story I was told is that when it was last run, it was surging, and then it was put away about a year and a half ago in a metal shed in someone's yard. So, it's been subjected to obviously temperature extremes, and by looking at the dirtiness, I'm not even sure how something can get this dirty. I don't see a lot of rust on the screws and the hardware, so I don't think it was stored outside, but it was definitely not in a clean environment for sure. So, the one thing, actually two things I did before taking it was I checked the gas tank, and to my surprise, the gas tank looks great compared to the outside of this machine. There's no gas in it, no smell of gas, and I don't see any scale or buildup. So that's very promising that maybe this was stored and put away properly. The other thing I did was pull the recoil, make sure the engine wasn't seized, and it's not. But it's not spinning as freely as I would expect it to be. And, it could just be the piston is dry, the cylinder's dry. I can think of a few other reasons. The most likely I'm thinking right now is that, maybe this wasn't stored properly. The fuel was left on, so potentially the needle didn't seat properly and all the fuel leaked out, flooded, and either drained out the airbox onto the ground or went into the cylinder. And that can cause a hydrolock condition, which this is not experiencing, but it was put away for a year and a half. So that's plenty of time for that gas to seep by the piston rings and go right into the crankcase. So I think I'm going to start with the oil. I'm going to pull the filler cap off and see what I see. Is there oil? Is it really thick? Or is it gushing out because it's full of gas? Anyway, let's get started. All right, so I'm ready to pull this fill plug out. And in case you're wondering, yes, those are soup cans. That's all I had, the best I had to get this thing off the ground. And, I'm just worried about a lot of stuff coming out of here, hopefully not. But I got a tray here to catch it just in case. Not bad, actually. So the crankcase is not overfilled. The oil color is actually pretty good. So I'm going to leave good enough alone, and if I get it running I will change the oil, but what I see in there is very clean. So I would say the last time it was run somebody did change the oil, and maybe they did store it properly. So good. Alright, so I think I'm going to pull that spark plug out and put some oil down the cylinder. But before doing that, I'm just going to blow this crap out of here. Yeah, that spark plug has seen better days. Might be original. Okay, so it's a little hard to get this all in frame, but what I got here is the spark plug tester, the original spark plug, and I had to ground it out down to the frame. There's nothing metal that this can reach to. So anyway, I have the ignition turned on, and when I give it a pull, you can see there's spark. And I don't know if it's showing up, but there is spark on this old spark plug. What I want to do is, I don't have a new spark plug, but I do have this other one. As you can see, it's more rusted here on the outside, but the electrode is in much better condition. There's no rust on it. So I'm going to try hooking this one up and just see if I get a better spark out of it. Yeah, it looks a little more blue and a little bit finer, the spark on this one. So I think I'm going to put this one in for now, and I'll come back to this later and order a new one if this machine comes back to life. That's tight. There we go. That is a bad fuel line. It's just coming apart. So, might have to replace the fuel line before seeing if it runs. There it is. You can tell this one's old. Anyway, feels really heavy. Let's get this apart, see what's inside. That was surprisingly loose. So, I see a few things here. I mean, the bowl gasket is messed up, but it doesn't look terrible in here. Someone may have gone through this already. it doesn't look bad. There is a, what is this? That might be a needle. Let me take that out and see what it is. So before I take it out, I'm going to turn it in just to see how far out it was. So that's a half, full, half, full. So we're up to 2, half. So 2.5 turns, it was out. And this here is just the idle screw. Not needed in a generator, just don't turn it out too far or else it won't be able to throttle down. But that is it. Let's get this thing cleaned up. All right, so it cleaned up pretty well. So I'm going to get this thing back together. Really not much with this one. This is the old bowl gasket. I don't know if you can see it, but it is pinched and mangled here and kind of over here. So I was able to find another one in my hoard, which fits pretty well. Okay, and then let's see, I guess we can do the needle and seat. Sorry, the needle and float. And speaking of the seat, it's looks to be in pretty good shape, so let's try this out and see if it leaks. Seems like we're missing something. All right, I have no idea where that pin went, but luckily I have a hoard of dead carburetors. So this particular pin came out of a Briggs style carburetor of the same vintage, and it fits fine. So the other thing is here, this is the original bowl gasket, and it's kind of getting broken up a little bit. I do have a brand new one here, because the new one has, I think, less material than the old one. But I'm going to go with the new one. Okay, and this screw is 2.5 turns out. So I'm going to turn it all the way in. You don't want to crank it down too tight because you could actually damage that needle. Okay, so half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and I'm going to go a little bit extra. And that is it. I'm just going to tighten that bowl a little bit better and we'll reinstall it and see what we need to do next. Okay, so before I get that carburetor back on, I do need to deal with this fuel line. When I took it off, it broke apart and it's cracked and it's petrified. So that line has to be replaced. It wraps around, you can kind of see it there, and comes over to here where the fuel shutoff is. So at a minimum, I got to replace it to the fuel shutoff and potentially all the way back to the gas tank. So to find out, I need to remove this cover. And while I'm at it, I'm probably just going to pull off this cover as well, so you can kind of see better what's going on. And also I'll do the recoil rope at the same time. Okay, so a few things here. I was hoping to save this hose, mostly because I don't want to damage anything up here. This fuel tank is plastic and old, as well as this grommet, and the piece here is also plastic that the hose goes onto. So if I break any of that, the part's not available, done. Won't be able to continue at that point. So I need to be very careful here. So most likely I'm going to cut the hose here, remove the fuel clamp, and probably try slicing the hose open and just peeling it off, trying to be as gentle as I can. The other thing I noticed here is that this is not factory. There is a fuel filter in this fuel tank, and it's intact. That's the only fuel filter you need. This is redundant, and it's actually a paper filter, which is not good on a gravity-fed system. It's more for a system that has a fuel pump. So that could restrict the fuel flow, causing it to stall and potentially start back up again a second later before it finishes rotating down. So that could actually cause surging as well, because not enough fuel is getting in the bowl. So that's going to be eliminated, new hose put on, and then we'll move on to the recoil. Okay, that was a pain, but I think I was wrong about that. It seems to be metal. That grommet is petrified, and I noticed when I was removing the hose, it kind of spins freely in the bottom of that tank. So I am concerned that it may not form a seal, and potentially the gas could leak. So I'm going to just start by getting a new line on there with the fuel shutoff, put a little bit of gas in there and see if it leaks. So I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on here to help it slide on without having to push too hard. Okay, good enough. I'm going to put a little bit of gas in here. I want to see if we got any leaks. All right, I'm going to let it sit for a few minutes and just make sure there's no leaks. You know, I probably put about half gallon at most in there. So give it some time and see what happens. Okay, so this recoil here seems to be integrated with the shroud for the cooling. And unfortunately, the only way to get a new rope on there is to remove this. So there's a bolt here on the bottom, another bolt here on the bottom, but I think there's a bolt or two up here under the fuel tank. So what I'm going to do is loosen and remove the handle. This fuel tank I don't think is actually secured. Actually, I might be wrong. I see that it's coming through here. So it'll be interesting to see how this comes out. But let me start with the handle and we'll go from there. Okay, so whoever designed this really never intended for the rope to be replaced. You know, on a easy one, you would just remove bolts here on the recoil and pull the recoil off, put a new rope on, no problem. On a difficult one, you actually have to pull this whole fan shroud off, which again, isn't that involved. It's 2 bolts on the bottom usually and 1 or 2 near the top. The only problem is this is part of the frame and it covers the top. So I said, okay, fine. We'll remove the gas tank to get access to the bolts. The gas tank doesn't come out because it's slotted into this frame. So in order to get the frame off, there's nothing on this side to remove. So then I came over here and unbolted this, the top 2 bolts, and then the bottom 2 actually go through the stator, which is not a great idea to take those out, but I took them out, slid this out, and the frame kind of comes down this side. It's not even really a frame, it's like a plate that supports the tank, and it supports the stator and other things. But anyway, so to get the frame off, you got to remove a couple bolts, and then there's 2 more bolts that hold the top of the stator on, which you could remove, but you got to hold the nut in the back, and on this side you can't access the nut, so then you got to take the muffler off to access the nut. And you can see where this is going. It's just way too involved. So I did this the hard way. I wound it by hand while still on there and fed the rope down and in. And I'm embarrassed to say, but it took a lot of effort, but given the options, I think this really is the only option on this one. So I have not let it pull the rope in, so hopefully I wound the spring enough to get enough rope in there to get a good pull. So let's see how far this goes in. So if it goes in that far, I'll be happy. Yeah, not too happy, but I think I'm gonna have to live with this. So, turn you back on in a bit. So, now I'm gonna finish up the fuel line and get the carburetor back on. Okay, good. I'm gonna let that fuel valve open up and fill up this carb just to make sure we don't have any leaks. And while I'm waiting for that, I did get a new spark plug in. So I'm gonna put that in. Just one thing to note with these, a lot of them say they're pre-gapped, and they usually are. This one was shipped, and they get banged up a lot, and that gap, that electrode was touching the ground pretty much completely. So you do have to double check them just to make sure nothing moved around in shipping. Okay, and actually before I put the spark plug in, I'm gonna put some oil in the spark plug hole. I know this looks like a lot, but this is about 1 teaspoon of oil, which is what's recommended for this engine. So it's been a few minutes, the carburetor is not leaking, so I think we're good there. I put the oil in the spark plug hole just to help the cylinder get lubricated. Hasn't been started in a while. And new spark plug is installed, gapped properly. So I think we're pretty much ready for ignition. I am gonna put the cover back on the other side where the fuel shutoff is, but I'm gonna leave this front one off because the pilot jet is right here. And I need that cover off to adjust that. So I'm not expecting the engine to run right, and I'm hoping by adjusting that pilot jet that I can dial it into something that is good. And sorry, one more thing I just remembered. The spark arrestor probably has never been cleaned, so I'm going to take care of that right now, and then we'll bring it outside and see what it does. Yeah, not too bad actually. This looks good. So I have seen in extreme cases where this gets completely clogged up and the engine will not run properly, if at all. All right, I think we're good. So I'm gonna bring this outside and see what it does. Alright, so I put the airbox back on. I just want to run this again and dial in the carburetor a little bit. The airbox can affect, you know, the ratio of air to fuel, so just want to make sure it runs okay with the airbox on and get the optimum setting. Okay, good. In this case, it really didn't need any adjustment. You know, with or without the filter, it seemed to be at the same setting. I ended up at 2 1/4 turns out. So I think that does it, more or less. I'm just going to put the end cover on and cut the rope at that length, and I think we're good. So that pretty much does it. I hope this video helps someone, and thanks for watching.